Broncos country, welcome back to another video here on the ParkerLovesSports YouTube channel. Thank you for taking a few minutes out of your day to spend them here with me. And in today's video, we're going to be going over my way too early Denver Broncos roster prediction. Now, I'm going to address the elephant in the room, the reason why I'm wearing these glasses. No, I don't need glasses, but when I make these videos, I typically spend a lot of time here on my computer, and my eyes are very sensitive to the blue light that it gives off. So I'm wearing my blue light glasses to record this video because I'm staring at my screen and at this screen to record everything. Now, another elephant in the room is I know I haven't uploaded in a while, and that's because, I was out of town a couple times. The first time I was out of town to see my cousin's graduation. The second time I was going on a family trip where I didn't have internet access. But I am finally back, and we're going to be going over my way too early Denver Broncos roster prediction. Now, if you haven't already, make sure you leave a like and subscribe to the channel as I am on the road to 1,000 subscribers. And if you could help me get closer to that goal, that would mean the absolute world to me. As, I feel like we're growing at a decently fast pace. A fast pace for me, for sure. But, yeah, so if you could help me reach that goal, that would mean the absolute world to me. And before we get started, as always, I just want to remind you that Jesus is King, and I pray that you give your life to him as he has got a plan and a purpose for you. I truly hope that you accept Jesus with your whole heart and believe that he died on the cross for your sins. A lot of people think that it's a lot of work to go to heaven, and well, we should do these good works and go to church and, spend a lot of time and read the Bible. Those things are good, but it's not what saves us. The sole thing that saves us is through Jesus' grace, through his sacrifice on the cross. And because he sacrificed himself on the cross and rose from the dead 3 days later, that is why we get to go to heaven. There is no other reason in which we get to go to heaven other than the grace of Jesus and his sacrifice that he made for us on the cross. Now, with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into my way too early Denver Broncos roster prediction. So, of course, first things first, we do have to start off with the injuries here. And linebacker Drew Sanders tore his Achilles, and he is going to be out for the entire season. Well, he's most likely going to be out for the entire season. There are scenarios where he can come back later in the season or potentially in the playoffs. I don't know if we're going to make the playoffs. I think this is a rebuilding year. I think this is going to be a foundational year in the rebuild, but we'll see. He could potentially come back in later of the season, and I think he was going to stick at inside linebacker with, of course, us drafting Jonah Ellis in the NFL draft fairly early. But yeah, that's a big blow to the linebacker room, which I personally think it's probably our weakest position group, but we'll get to that when we cross to it. But Drew Sanders is a big, big loss. I thought he was going to have a solid impact here in his second NFL season. Now, let's start off with the quarterbacks for the roster prediction. I think we're going to be carrying two quarterbacks on the roster. And in my opinion, Bo Nix is going to be the starter. Now, I think this is a fairly common opinion among Broncos fans that Bo Nix will start week 1. However, I have seen some scenarios where he'll sit and then maybe take over halfway through the season, or maybe he'll sit his entire rookie year. Now, the reason I think he's going to be the starter is personally coming out of the draft, I thought he was a first-round quarterback. Now, I didn't have him near pick 12, but I did think he was a first-round quarterback. That coupled with the, obviously that's just my opinion, but that coupled with his 61 starts in college football, making him one of the most experienced, I think actually the most experienced prospect coming out of college into the NFL, that is going to help him start. Now, of course, college starts in the NFL aren't the same, but with that large, volume of starts in college, I think that is going to be a big factor in him starting this year. He is on the older side, and I do think he will start. He's picking up the playbook fast from everything we've heard from Sean Payton. We're going into week 3 of OTAs. And so, in my opinion, I do believe Bo Nix will be the week 1 starter. Just he has a lot of college experience. I don't know if Sean Payton is going to want him to wait another year. I think he's going to essentially feed him to the wolves, and that can be a good and bad thing. You look at Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, C.J. Stroud. Those type of guys have had a lot of success when they've started right away. But then on the flip side, you got the Zach Wilsons, you got the Bryce Youngs, who maybe aren't surrounded in the best situation, and they're young and they're thrown right into the wolves. So it will be interesting to see. But in my opinion, I do think Bo Nix will be the week 1 starter for the Denver Broncos. And that'll come. What comes next is who is going to be the backup. It's either going to be Jarrett Stidham or it's going to be Zach Wilson. And it could go either way, but in my opinion, I do have it being Zach Wilson. Now, the reason being is obviously we didn't trade a whole lot. So if we cut him and another team picks him up or whatever happens, it's not the biggest deal because we traded a 6th-round pick for Zach Wilson, and then we got a 7th-round pick back with Zach Wilson. But in my opinion, I think Sean Payton likes the upside that Zach Wilson brought. Again, he was the he was the number 2 overall pick in 2021. So he's still a young guy who has 33 NFL starts under his belt. And I think Sean Payton likes the upside that he could bring. And, he can work with Zach Wilson and see if there is something there. Maybe not necessarily as an NFL starter, but maybe can become a solid backup for the Broncos in the future or whatnot. But I think Sean Payton likes the tools that Zach Wilson has. He's got this strong arm, hasn't put it together in the NFL. And so I do think Zach Wilson will be the number 2 quarterback just because I do believe that Sean Payton believes in Zach Wilson and we gave up capital for him. Obviously, both Stidham and Wilson will be going into the final years of their deal this season. So, contract-wise, you can't really have an edge. Oh, this guy's going to be here longer. It could go either way, but in my opinion, I do believe Zach Wilson will be the number 2 quarterback come, I guess the regular season. And we'll make an updated roster prediction and we'll make a final roster video in the future when we get closer to kickoff. I'll probably make a roster prediction video again as preseason starting, and then we'll make the final roster video, of course, when the final roster is released around late July, I guess it'll be August, September-ish is when the official roster will be released. Next up, we have the running backs, and we're going to have 5 running backs here, of course. I guess in this running back group, we will have our fullback because the fullback is a running back as well. So I just decided to group halfbacks and fullbacks together for this. And starting off, I have Javonte Williams as the number 1 back. I'm hoping Javonte can bounce back because we all remember his rookie season. He was just this tank, was running through everyone. It was hard to take him down. Year 2 starts off strong. Then in week 4 goes down against the Raiders, and it was a torn ACL. And so it was like we were all thinking, will he be back in time for last season? He was, but he didn't look like the same player. So I'm hoping in year 4 that Javonte Williams can bounce back because this is the final year of his contract. He was a 2nd-round pick, final year of his contract to prove things, and hopefully he can bounce back. But, if not, we do have some other guys here in this running back room. One of them being Jaleel McLaughlin, the undrafted free agent from last season. He's your scat back, can help out in the receiving game, going to be very shifty, smaller, easier to hide behind his blockers, kind of filling in that Phillip Lindsay mold. I'm not saying he is Phillip Lindsay, but he kind of feels like that Phillip Lindsay mold in my opinion. And I really like what Jaleel McLaughlin has brought, and I do think he will be back on the roster this upcoming season. Number 3, it's going to be 5th-round rookie Audric Estime, who is that bruiser back. He's going to run through people. That's his specialty, is just physical football. He's not the fastest guy, but after watching him, he wasn't as slow as I thought he was going to be. So he does have some speed. It's not this, don't expect this crazy speed, but he's got some decent speed. It's not going to break away or anything. People are going to be able to catch up to him, but he was a little faster than I thought. But the main thing about Audric Estime is he's this big guy, and he is not afraid of contact. He is not going to be afraid to run through you. And so Audric Estime is going to be our number 3 back. And then the number 4 back I actually have is undrafted free agent Blake Watson. So that means Samaje Perine does not make the cut. And I feel like a lot of Broncos fans, if there is a current running back, or I guess a vet, or one of the running backs that won't be back that was here last year, I think Samaje Perine is the consensus guy who's out of that running back room. And in comes Blake Watson, who is the gem of our undrafted free agent class. In my opinion, I expected Blake Watson to be drafted. If it were up to me in the draft, I probably would have drafted Blake Watson. Not probably. I would have drafted Blake Watson over Devon Vele because I didn't know who that was, and Nick Gargiulo. After watching both of them back, I don't mind the Vele pick. I probably still would have drafted Blake Watson over Gargiulo, but Blake Watson, he's going to be a shiftier back. He's going to have a little bit more speed to him, a little bit bigger than Jaleel McLaughlin, but in my opinion, I like what Blake Watson brings as a running back. I think he can be that receiving back and help in the receiving game like Samaje Perine did for a lot cheaper being an undrafted free agent. So, in my opinion, I do think Blake Watson does make this roster as of right now. I'm hoping he does because I really liked what I saw out of Blake Watson in college, out of Memphis. And there were some mock drafts where I don't think I took a running back a lot, if at all, in my mock drafts, but I was looking at Blake Watson in the later rounds, in the 5th round, heck, even in the 6th, 7th round when we traded back and whatnot. But yeah, I do expect Blake Watson to make the roster as of right now. And then, of course, as the fullback, we have Michael Burton, who has worked with Sean Payton a lot, has previous experience. Previous experience in New Orleans, and he's the guy. We run a couple fullback draws with Michael Burton. He's mostly going to be known as a blocker. He's going to be an additional blocker and whatnot. Can play in the receiving game, but he's mostly going to be your blocker, and he's going to be that true fullback who we had last year, obviously, but before that we had Andrew Beck, who was the tight end fullback hybrid. Michael Burton is just a pure fullback. Next up, let's get to the wide receivers, and this is a very interesting group. So, let's look at the wide receivers. The number one receiver on this team will be Courtland Sutton as of right now. There's been a lot of rumors that Courtland Sutton could easily be traded, and, we'll see what happens. I'm not going to project a trade. There's a lot of times you project something and then it doesn't happen and you kind of look like an idiot. I'm not going to project a Courtland Sutton trade. If he gets traded, he gets traded, and obviously everyone will get bumped up a spot in the wide receiver room, and then I think we'll probably bring someone in who I'll talk about later. But as of right now, Courtland Sutton is the number one wide receiver on this team, and he's going to kind of be that safety valve guy for Bo Nix. He's going to be the jump ball receiver. If you need to throw it up to someone, Courtland will be there. Most likely he is going to bring it down. Last season did struggle with a couple of drops, but in my opinion, Courtland Sutton will be the wide receiver one, and he will be a veteran wide receiver for Bo Nix to throw to kind of help get his feet under him right away, to help the transition from college to the NFL. Next up, it is going to be Josh Reynolds again, who had an underrated season in Detroit, in my opinion. Now, we'll see what happens. I do think Josh Reynolds is an underrated wide receiver. Now, I'm not saying that this guy's a sleeper. He is one of the best wide receivers in football. No one's talking about it. I'm not saying that. But Josh Reynolds is a solid number 2 option to help out your rookie quarterback in Bo Nix. He's a veteran guy. He's going to work with Sean Payton. I think he brings what Sean Payton wants. And so, in my opinion, Josh Reynolds and Courtland Sutton are a solid 1-2 veteran punch for the Denver Broncos. Now, after we get past them, we get the youth coming in. And the number 3 guy is going to be Marvin Mims. Of course, a great special teamer, great punt returner, and is going to benefit from the new kickoff rule. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. I guess actually we'll talk about that right now. He is going to be the punt and kick returner for the Denver Broncos, but I do expect Sean Payton to implement Marvin Mims more into the offense. He's got a lot of speed, and he can be that deep threat down the field. He's not the biggest guy, but I do think his catch and traffic ability is a lot better than people expect. I think his jump ball ability is better than people expect. I'm not saying he's crazy at it, but I think he is better than people realize in those areas. But I think the main thing you want to notice about Marvin Mims is he is a speedster. He's not very big. But yes, Marvin Mims does have a lot of speed, and he's going to be the number 3 wide receiver for the Denver Broncos in my prediction here. At number 4, we have rookie 4th round pick Troy Franklin. Now, I've said it a bunch. I said it a bunch in my draft recap, my draft streams. A lot of people had Troy Franklin projected as a late 1st round pick, early 2nd round pick. Falls all the way to the 4th round. Now, I didn't have him near the end of the 1st, top of the 2nd round. I had him as a mid to late 2nd round guy. So getting him in the 4th round to me was extreme value. However, I know a lot of Broncos fans want Troy Franklin to start as maybe the wide receiver 2 behind Courtland Sutton. And I want that too because of the chemistry. Maybe he's able to make his way up to wide receiver number 3 because of that chemistry. But in my opinion, Troy Franklin is going to start out as the wide receiver 4. Of course, maybe we trade Courtland Sutton and he gets bumped up. And so Bo Nix has his guy, has that chemistry. But for right now, I do believe Troy Franklin is going to be the wide receiver 4. Now, Franklin is a taller guy. I think, if I remember correctly, he's like 6'1", 6'2". There are some sites that have him at 6'3". I haven't looked at the Broncos' official measurements, but he is a taller guy. He's got a lot of speed like Marvin Mims. I will say his route running kind of lacks. I was kind of disappointed when seeing his route running. I would like to see him improve at that. But when a play breaks down, you should see his chemistry with Bo Nix. Franklin will find the open space so Bo Nix can have that essentially escape route. He can throw it to Troy Franklin in space. He's going to help work on finding the open space and sitting there and waiting for the football. To me, Troy Franklin has a lot of upside, and I want him to be a starter right away. I want him to be in that top 3, but I just can't justify putting Troy Franklin in the top 3 with the 2 veterans in Sutton and Reynolds, and then Marvin Mims, who is going into his 2nd year. We used a 2nd round pick on him. I can't justify putting him above Marvin Mims, but I'm excited about what Troy Franklin can bring to this team, and I hope that he is utilized early in the NFL season, and we can see that Nix to Franklin connection very, very early. Next up at number 5, I have Tim Patrick, and this hurts putting Tim Patrick this low because Tim Patrick was a fan favorite. I remember it was, well, of course, he's been out for 2 seasons. He tore his ACL, tore his Achilles in back-to-back years, missed both seasons, which I can't imagine. You got to feel bad for Tim Patrick. Goes the first year with Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson comes in. You're excited to see Tim Patrick with him. Tim Patrick gets hurt. Then last year he comes back. You're excited to see him with him. Gets hurt. So we never got to see Tim Patrick with Russell Wilson, but you got to feel bad for Patrick, and I think he is going to prove his spot on the roster. But I remember back a couple seasons ago, I believe Courtland was hurt, Jerry Jeudy was hurt, and so Tim Patrick became the number 1 wide receiver, and he looked very, very solid. Now, I don't love him as a wide receiver 1, but as a complimentary receiver, I do think that Tim Patrick is a solid option. So maybe he even is higher than this. But for right now, because of the injuries, because I don't know what we have in Tim Patrick, I don't know if the injuries are going to affect him. Is he going to be the same player coming back from these injuries? I have to put him as the wide receiver 5, but I do think that Tim Patrick makes the roster, and we'll see what we have. But Tim Patrick can be a solid receiver for Bo Nix. If he can stay healthy, can stay on the field. And then we'll have to see, of course, what playing time is added for Tim Patrick as well. And next up at wide receiver 6, I have Lil Jordan Humphrey, who I was impressed with last season. I believe at some points, Lil Jordan Humphrey was our wide receiver 1 last year, just with some injuries. Because I think, I can't remember if Jeudy and Sutton both got hurt. If not, I really can't remember. Maybe not. Maybe not. But nonetheless, I was impressed with what Lil Jordan Humphrey brought to the Broncos. And so I'm hoping he is going to be back. However, if he isn't back, I guess, okay. So if Lil Jordan Humphrey isn't the wide receiver 6, or if Cortland Sutton is traded and everyone gets bumped up a spot, essentially, my number 6 wide receiver would be the 7th round rookie Devon Vele. But for right now, I do have Little Jordan Humphrey as the wide receiver 6 because I was thoroughly impressed with what Little Jordan Humphrey brought to the Denver Broncos. We're 20 minutes in, so I am going to start to speed this up so we're not here forever. Next up, we have the tight ends, and at number 1, I am going to put Greg Dulcich here. I do think when he's healthy, he's going to be the wide receiver 1. He is going to be that vertical threat for Sean Payton. He is going to be that extra receiver out there to help out Bo Nix. Isn't the greatest in run block, or I guess not run block, isn't the greatest as a blocker in general, I should say. But I want to see what Dulcich has spent a lot of his time on the IR in his first 2 seasons in the NFL. Going into year 3, I want to see what we have in Greg Dulcich, because if he's injured this season, I'm drafting a tight end fairly early in this upcoming draft. I think Luke Lachey, Colston Loveland, both could be options for the Broncos, but we'll see what happens. I want to see what we have in Greg Dulcich. At tight end number 2, we have Adam Troutman, who is kind of that hybrid guy, can be a blocker and can be used as a receiver as well, more so as a blocker. Isn't the greatest receiver, isn't the greatest route runner, but can be used as a receiver. And then as our tight end number 3, I have Lucas Kroll. A lot of Broncos fans seem to think Lucas Kroll could be the answer, and we'll see. We'll see. I'm excited to see what Lucas Kroll can do. It's either between him and undrafted free agent from last season, Nate Atkins. I think Kroll gets the job done. I think we're carrying 3 tight ends this year. We'll see what actually happens, but Kroll could be an underrated guy for the Broncos. We'll just have to see how everything goes, but he performed pretty solid at the end of last season. Next up, we have the offensive line, specifically the offensive tackles. And at left tackle, I am going to have it being, I guess, how do I phrase this? Because that grammar was not great. But at left tackle, it is going to be Garrett Bowles. I do think this might be Garrett Bowles' last season on the Denver Broncos. We'll have to see. I think we're going to go young, and I think we're probably going to draft an offensive tackle early in next year's draft. And the reason why it's going to be Bowles is because his contract is expiring, whereas Mike McGlinchey's, I believe, has 3-4 more years on it. And Garrett Bowles is on the older side. When we drafted him as a rookie, he was on the older side as well. But we'll have to see what happens for this season. I mean, the future right now for this prediction doesn't really matter. That's just kind of my thoughts. But for right now, I do have Garrett Bowles being the starting left tackle. At the starting right tackle, we have Mike McGlinchey, who we signed to a big contract. If you think he's going anywhere, you're mistaken. The contract means he's going to be here for a while. So I know a lot of fans want us to replace Mike McGlinchey or cut him or trade him. That's not going to happen. Mike McGlinchey will be the right tackle. I still like Mike McGlinchey, and I still have belief in him. He was one of the guys who I saw in free agency and wanted us to sign. I think it was Caleb McGarry last year as the first tackle I want us to sign, then Mike McGlinchey. We got McGlinchey, and hopefully he could improve from last season, because last season he wasn't that great. I'm going to be honest. I like McGlinchey, but he was not that great. So I'm hoping for a better season from Mike McGlinchey. As a swing tackle, I have it being Alec Palkowski, who was an undrafted free agent out of Illinois last season. I believe the Broncos like him. After training camp or after the preseason, I can't remember when, but Alec Palkowski, he got injured, was placed on IR, which is standard. Teams do that, but after he came off IR, the Broncos never cut him, released him, waived him, put him on the practice squad. He stayed on the Broncos roster. And so that leads me to believe that the Denver Broncos like him as a prospect, as a player. And so I kind of like him as well. I do think he's going to be our swing tackle this upcoming season. Obviously, we didn't bring back Cam Fleming, so I do think Palkowski will be the swing tackle. And the number 4 tackle I have being undrafted free agent rookie Frank Crum. Now, this might be a controversial pick, and that's fine. We could definitely, take him off and then add to a different position group, potentially because, of course, there's 53 players on the roster, so we could maybe take one off here, add another tight end, add another linebacker, add another this, that. But I like Frank Crum and his upside, and my biggest fear would be us placing him on the practice squad and then another team signing him off our practice squad. That would be my biggest fear. And then, of course, another thing we could do is you could put Matt Pert here as a swing tackle. But I like Frank Crum. I like the youth movement, and I like what he brings. He's a mean, nasty guy from what you guys described to me. Just a little raw, not NFL ready, essentially, at this point. But I like him as a guy to potentially develop behind our other guys. Next up, we have centers and guards. And the first guard, it's going to be our right guard, Quinn Miners, one of the best guards in the NFL. In my opinion, there are 2 contract extensions that the Denver Broncos need to sign, and that is cornerback Pat Surtain, obviously, and guard Quinn Miners. He is one of the best guards in the entire NFL, and in my opinion, our best offensive lineman. So yeah, he's going to be the number 1 guard, primarily plays as the right guard next to McGlinchey. But yeah, Quinn Miners is one of our starting guards. Another starting guard is going to be Ben Powers, who we signed in free agency. I guess we didn't sign him in this free agency, but we signed him last year in free agency, and he was our left guard last season. And I like Ben Powers as well. These 2 were solid starting guards. In at center, though, we do have Alex Forsyth. I have him winning the job. I had him winning the job even before we drafted Bo Nix, but replacing Lloyd Cushenberry is not going to be easy, but I do have it being Alex Forsyth because he does have chemistry with Bo Nix. He was Bo Nix's center 2 seasons ago. He's a smart guy, high football IQ, and I believe that he will win the starting center job and he will be oh my goodness, I just stuttered hard there. He will be reunited with Bo Nix. Next up, we have Calvin Throckmorton, who we signed in free agency this past season. He can play guard, he can play center, so he's kind of that versatile interior guy who you like. Could throw him at tackle, I wouldn't, but he can play guard, he can play center. And so Calvin Throckmorton, he was the guy who I liked coming out in 2020. I believe one of my first mock drafts I ever did here on this channel. I had us taking him in the 3rd round. Throckmorton eventually went undrafted. And so I do like what Calvin Throckmorton brings, and I have him kind of as that backup center, backup guard role. Whatever you need him to do, he can fill in and do that. And then the final guy there I have as Luke Wattenberg, who was a 5th round pick in, what was it? I think it was 2022. 5th round pick in 2022 is Hackett's class, which was, I don't even want to go think about that draft class right now, but he was in the Hackett draft class. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get in center here because I think my face might have been off the face cam. But Luke Wattenberg can play guard, can play center as well. Kind of that versatile guy. I think he's competing currently for the center job. I think Forsyth obviously wins that. And so I think he becomes another backup guy. He can play guard as well. So you got Throckmorton and Wattenberg there as depth offensive linemen. Next up, we're moving to the defensive line here. Starting off, we got John Franklin Myers, who was a big pickup on day 3 of the NFL draft. Or I guess not instantly, but he is going to help out in that defensive line room when a lot of us thought we were going to address the interior defensive line address it in the draft with a pick. Sean Payton, George Payton, we go out and we trade for John Franklin Myers from the Jets for a 2026 6th round pick, and he is going to make a major impact on our defensive line. And then, of course, we have Zach Allen, who we signed in free agency last year, who had a very solid season. In his first season, I guess that was horrible grammar, but he had a very solid first season in the orange and blue. After signing him in free agency last year, I'm excited to see what he can do in year 2 with the Denver Broncos. Of course, very familiar with Vance Joseph being there in Arizona when he was the DC, coming over here, and Vance Joseph was the DC. But I really like John Franklin Myers and Zach Allen as our 2 defensive ends because, of course, we run a 3-4 where our outside linebackers are the edge rushers, so the defensive ends are the defensive linemen. I like those two guys as the defensive ends, and then of course we have DJ Jones as the nose tackle. We're going to potentially trade DJ Jones this offseason after signing him 2 years ago from the 49ers in free agency. He's going to stay put, and I don't know, he's been kind of underwhelming in my opinion. Had some solid moments, but has been kind of underwhelming. But he'll be the nose tackle for the Denver Broncos, and we will see what he can do in year 2 under Sean Payton. Next up, we have Malcolm Roach, who is kind of a depth guy, specializes in stopping the run, which is where we needed to address our defensive lineman depth. And so he is going to provide depth for the defensive line. I still don't think our defensive line is crazy or anything, but we got a solid starter in John Franklin Myers. And then we got a solid depth guy in Malcolm Roach, who signed as an undrafted free agent out of Texas with the Saints in 2020. Both him and Calvin Throckmorton were in that undrafted free agent class for the Saints. Next up, we have Matt Henningsen, who was our 6th round pick in 2022, who got chances to be a starter, and it was okay, but wasn't anything great. He is going to still be in that defensive lineman room. And then finally, I have Elijah Garcia being that 6th guy for the Denver Broncos. It'll be interesting to note what is going to happen with Ioma Uwazurike, the 4th round pick in 2022. Of course, last season he was suspended for gambling, and we'll see what happens. Are the Broncos going to keep him around, or are we going to cut him? It'll be interesting to see, because if we don't cut him, I would say he would take Elijah Garcia's spot here, but I don't know. It's tough because I like Elijah Garcia. I like what he brought to the team last season. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. I still don't think our defensive line room is crazy or anything, but it's definitely an upgrade from what we had last season. As for the edge rushers, there are going to be 4 on the team here in my prediction. The first one being Baron Browning, who was hurt at the start of the season. I really like what he brought to the team, and yeah, going to continue to develop here for the Broncos. Started as an inside backer, moved out to the edge, and I think can be our number 1 edge rusher. It'll be interesting, though, because I do like Nick Bonito coming off the edge. I like his development. I think he can be a solid guy. Maybe he's not a true number 1 edge rusher. Maybe he is, but I definitely think that he can be a very, very solid number 2 edge rusher. And then a number 2 edge rusher for the Denver Broncos. He is just a pass rush specialist. Not only that, last season, he even started to improve in stopping the run as well. I'm super high on Nick Bonito, and right now he is our number 2 edge rusher. Maybe he becomes the number 1 as the season goes on. We will have to see. Then, of course, we have Jonathan Cooper, Baron Browning's Ohio State teammate, who was very solid last season, made a solid impact for the Broncos. And then number 4, we have rookie Jonah Ellis, who kind of like Nick Bonito needed to coming out of the draft. Jonah Ellis needs to work on stopping the run, but he is a solid pass rusher. I believe he was even hurt at the end of the season, so he didn't look as good because he was dealing with an injury. Jonah Ellis, from what I've heard, I was lower on him when I gave my draft grades, but dude, I'm kind of excited about Jonah Ellis. I'm not gonna lie. I'm kind of excited to see Jonah Ellis. We'll see how much playing time he gets, because Sean Payton is pretty notorious for not playing rookies in their first season, but we will have to see. If there's only 4 guys, I do think Jonah Ellis will be rotated in there every once in a while. Then, of course, we have the inside linebackers, which, in my opinion, this is going to be the weakest room. We got Alex Singleton, who's just a tackling machine. He's going to help assist in the tackle, or he's going to make a play and bring down the defenders. He's very solid at reading and stopping the run. However, as a pass rusher, solid. I wouldn't say so. I say decent. And then as a in pass coverage, that's kind of where he struggles. Isn't the greatest in terms of pass coverage. Next up, we have Cody Barton, who was, I thought he was going to be the number 3 linebacker, but he was not great last season. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. He was not great last season. So the fact that he has to be a potential starter is a bit worrisome. Again, it's a rebuilding year. I'm not expecting a whole lot from this season, but I'm not a huge fan of our inside linebacker room right now. Let's just say that. Next up, we got Jonas Griffith, who I really like, has some upside. We traded for a couple years ago, was supposed to mostly be a special teamer. Ended up having to play, and he was actually pretty solid. And I like what Jonas Griffith can bring. I believe he missed all of last season. We'll see what happens coming off of the injury. We'll see what type of player he is coming off the injury. But yeah, I like Jonas Griffith. We'll see what happens. And then we have Justin Strnad, who was a 5th-round pick in 2020 out of Wake Forest. Really didn't live up to the hype. Wasn't anything spectacular. The Broncos signed him to a 1-year deal. I didn't think the Broncos were going to keep him after the preseason. I thought he was going to probably get cut. But with the injury to Drew Sanders, Justin Strnad is going to make the roster one more time. Now, moving on to the cornerbacks here, we have Patrick Surtain II, cornerback out of Alabama. And yeah, I mean, I don't need to talk to you about Pat Surtain. We all know who Pat Surtain is. He is going to be the cornerback 1 for this team. One of, if not the best corner in the NFL. I think he's the best corner in the NFL, but you can call me biased because I'm a Broncos fan. But yeah, Pat Surtain is the number 1 cornerback. Next up, we have Jaquan McMillan, who is going to be in the slot. Undrafted free agent rookie out of East Carolina. Not last season, but 2 seasons ago. Played in the final game his rookie year. Looks solid. I would say, yeah, solid. Nothing great, but then he started to get more playing time last season. Isang Bassi was slowly phased out. Jaquan McMillan was phased in, and he was really solid. I'd say probably the last few games he started to struggle just a little bit, but I really like what Jaquan McMillan brings to be our potential slot nickel cornerback. And right now, just off of pure talent, I think he's our cornerback 2. And then as, I guess, the technical cornerback 2, who will be on the outside opposite Pat Surtain, I'm having that being Riley Moss. We traded up for him back, not this past draft, but the 2023 draft. We traded up for him in the 3rd round. Was hurt a majority of last season. Didn't get a whole lot of playing time at cornerback. I still like Riley Moss, and I think Sean Payton likes him too. Obviously, he traded up for him. So, to me, Riley Moss, I think he's going to get a shot to play as the cornerback number 2. Now, Damari Mathis was given that shot and struggled, so he was obviously phased out after a little bit. I think Riley Moss is going to have the opportunity to play as that cornerback 2, and if he struggles, I do believe that Vance Joseph and Sean Payton will be looking to potentially replace him, but we'll see. I still like Riley Moss, and we'll see what he brings to the NFL. I guess not to the NFL, but we'll see what he brings to the Broncos, and technically his first season playing. Played a little bit of special teams last season, but was hurt for a little bit as well. Next up, we also brought in Levi Wallace, who could absolutely be the cornerback 2 to start the year, and that would not shock me if Levi Wallace was the cornerback 2 to start the year. He kind of is that Fabian Moreau type of guy who is, he's a starter, but he's not a high-end starter at the cornerback position. A free agent signing, but I do think he makes the roster either way. We'll see where he starts off, if he's going to be the cornerback 2, or maybe he's a cornerback 3 and more of a depth guy. We'll have to see as, I guess, preseason and everything goes on. Next up, at number 5, we have Chris Abrams-Draine, who is the 5th round pick for the Denver Broncos. Going to be more of a slot guy. I really like what Abrams-Draine brings. He was my number 10 cornerback in the entire class. I don't think he's going to play a whole lot next season, but I do like the upside that Abrams-Draine brings to the Broncos. And finally, I just skipped right past that. I do have Damari Mathis. He was a 4th round pick. I think obviously he struggled last season, but I don't think the Broncos have given up on him. I do think he's going to make the roster, and he's going to continue to improve. We'll see how long his leash is if he gets some playing time, but Yeah, I do think the Broncos haven't given up on Damari Mathis yet, so I do think he makes the I do think he makes the roster as cornerback number 6 this season. And I guess not finally, but next up we do have the safeties. I do have Caden Stearns starting as the strong safety. I'm going to continue. I'm just going really fast through this because we're at 40 minutes in. I just started to ramble and yap and yap and yap. But Caden Stearns as the strong safety, Brandon Jones as a free safety. Got PJ Locke, who I think could be the backup for either or, and will get substituted and rotated in every now and then. And heck, could even start over Caden Stearns or Brandon Jones. Then we got Delaren Turner-Yell. It's funny because the first 3 guys are all from Texas, and then Delaren Turner-Yell is from Oklahoma. And then finally, we have 6th-round pick from last season, J.L. Skinner, who I'm hoping gets some more playing time this season because I really liked what J.L. Skinner brought to the Denver Broncos. He was my number 3 safety in last year's class, but didn't get a whole lot of playing time, dealt with some injuries, and so we'll see what is in store for J.L. Skinner this upcoming season. And finally, we have the special teams. The kicker, in my opinion, it's going to be Will Lutz. The punter, I do have Riley Dixon. I know we brought in competition for Riley Dixon, but I do think he wins the competition. I know the punter we brought in too for the competition. I just can't think of his name off the top of my head right now, but I do have Riley Dixon winning the punting competition. And then as a long snapper, I do think it's going to be Mitchell Fraboni. Yes, that is. Oh, sorry, I forgot. I put some potential practice squad guys, and it's going to be Devon Bailey, who I do think could make the roster. Depends on how the wide receiver room shapes out. You got Nick Gargiulo and cornerback Art Green. Those are the 3 guys as of right now who I'd like the Denver Broncos to sign to their practice squad. Sorry. But with that being said, thank you all so much for watching. Make sure you leave a like and subscribe to the channel as the support is greatly appreciated. My name is Parker, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace out.